Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think the Eutropolis idea is fascinating, and especially if you make the link with the underground map, how you see what it means in a change of mindset. It describes a future that is attractive, that is prosperous, that is fascinating. It is almost some kind of promised land. And we have quite a few promised lands. We also have the promised land, let's say, of a sustainable future. We have the promised land of a united Europe. And what I want to do today is not to fill in one of these visions, but to ask the other question, how do we get there? Because it's quite interesting that there are many future visions that we all want and that we all agree on, and nevertheless, if you're honest, it's not happening. Many promised lands remain exactly that, promised lands. And if you know why that is so, what the barrier is that we have to climb, you have a bigger chance of achieving your objective in the end. The main reason, I think, why this is so blocked and paralyzed in many instances is that when we say that this is what we want, there is in reality no we. We say that this is a good thing, that is a nice future. But if you ask the people, if you talk to them more individually on a one-to-one basis, you see that in fact they profoundly differ in their opinions and aspirations. And that is the kind of difference we very often do not take into account. We stick with the generalized statements that a good future is what we all stand for. I can give you a simple example, and that is sustainability. It's one of these things that, of course, we all want. We all agree with that. We all want a sustainable future. How could you not want a sustainable future? And then we are surprised that in Copenhagen things don't work out. It's because we missed a step in between. We did not realize that many people do want a sustainable future, but mean something completely different. They are, when you ask them individually and when you go in depth, they are not worried. They are not concerned. They believe that technology will solve the sustainability problems. They believe that many disasters have been predicted before and didn't happen. Gurus are often wrong. The price mechanism will come to our aid. We are far more resilient and creative, and as a result of that, they have a tendency to sit on their hands. And you see then that if there's an economic crisis, the sustainability issues drop on the priority list quite quickly. And unless we are willing to see that the differences between the various mindsets are so important, we will remain with the feeling that everything is paralyzed. It's the same for Europe. After the war, Europe was a promised land as well. At this time, Europe was going never to repeat the mistakes of the past. And how could you disagree with that? Nobody did. It seemed a one-way street. It could only go in one direction. And nevertheless, if you see what is happening over the last 10 years, it's quite disappointing. It was not predetermined. We have moved into a different direction. If you see how a few months ago we jumped on the Greeks, how we spoke of Club Med countries of the European Union that were wasting our money. If you see how ungenerous we were, if you see the nationalism in many countries where people have one need, and that has indeed to do with fear, that they have to be proud of their country, that they become very defensive as a response. And that in Britain you have a company, or a political party I should say, fighting for independence. I saw a few days ago an article by Professor Kapchat, and he wrote 8 years ago a book on how Europe was becoming one of the major international players. This time his story was, Europe is falling apart as a result of growing nationalism and is becoming irrelevant. The same is true for the EU-region. And there was 50 years ago, there was a beautiful black and white picture book, Land Without Borders. It was about the cities of Aachen, Liège and Maastricht. And the generation of my parents, they lived in that environment. To them, the unity was a shared common culture, a shared heritage. They may not have spoken English very well, but they certainly speak they spoke German and French. They felt that it was normal to be mobile. And Frans Timmermans, earlier on, he pointed out that a region like here, in the mining area of Heerlen, was very Euregional. And if you compare that with many of the signs we pick up later, then it's not all progress. And it is important, in spite of all idealism and visions that we need, to also say what is not going in that particular direction. It's true that the Euregion at the moment is a concept. It has many names, but it is hesitant. It's not powerful. It has not many friends in high places. There are fewer Dutch students in Aachen now than there were 30 years ago. Dutch and French have disappeared from the curriculum in schools. If you listen to Dutch radio and you hear how people speak about Belgium, there is not much empathy there. So it is not a predetermined direction. We cannot assume that this kind of united Europe, this kind of Euregion, will happen all by themselves, because when we look again, we can see that that is indeed not the case. There is a planning methodology to try and discuss these things in a more systematic manner, and that is scenario planning. In fact, in essence, it's very simple. What you do is you say, I will describe one future, for example, for this region, and that is how it could go. That is a plausible future. In the case of the Euregion, it would mean, for example, that we will grow. Not every community, not every town will grow, but as a region, we will grow. And that has a lot to do with the fact that students do not leave this region, will stay here, that many more young people will, in fact, make their mark on this region. It's the creative class, as it has been called. And these people have the energy and the talent to create innovation. Innovation is not an internet-based item. Innovation is local. Innovation comes from people who can see each other's body language, who can meet one another. That is why cities are important. But the cities of the Eutropolis region will indeed rise to the challenge. They will realize that they have to appeal to people who are not rooted here and who may very easily go somewhere else when they don't like it here. The region will realize that you have to attract these people by convincing them, which means cultural diversity, openness, tolerance. It has to be a lively environment that challenges young people. Because by now, employers follow their talented people and not the other way around. But this will happen. The region will indeed do that. They will create the critical mass. They will indeed pick up the idea of Eutropolis, that we have the size of one major city. And they will make sure that we have the infrastructure to make the connections that a big city needs. They will make sure that we have the cultural diversity, that there will be housing at all kinds of levels, that the region as a whole has its rough edges, but also its high-quality neighborhoods. And they will make sure that we stop with duplication. Maastricht will not get a technical university. We will point people in the direction of Aachen. Maastricht-Aachen Airport will not be expanded. We will point people to Liège. We will have ever more civil servants who are not just holding on to the rules, but who have the job to facilitate life for the innovative people that we have, who will in fact help people to break their own rules, to bypass them, who will point them in the right direction, who will make contacts with the right people. That is when, in the end, the whole concept of your region becomes something with content. Well, it will have a narrative. That is when Eutropolis also will become a meaningful concept. Not because the lines on the maps are drawn differently, but because there are ever more people who see it makes sense. It's nice. There will be champions. It creates an atmosphere of excitement, of self-confidence. And then what? Basically, then we wake up. Because this was just one scenario. It's possible, it's plausible, but it's interesting to see that the team that developed this scenario thought it was not very probable. they felt that the region was not on that track, that the conditions that are fulfilled in this scenario are not being fulfilled at the moment. And once again, the reason is the same. It seems like a promised land, it seems like a good thing to aim for, but many people disagree. And when you go in more depth, and when you have more interviews, and when you do research as to what people really want, you realize that perhaps a majority of the people in the region are not on this track at all. Many people have nothing with creative class. They don't believe that civil servants will ever become a coach. And they believe that people will compete, and will go and run with their own projects now and in 20 years' time just the same, and they also feel that that is exactly what should happen. Let these people build the hotels and the hospitals, the kind of things they're doing at the moment, and the long term will take care of itself. And if in the end somebody wants to see Eutropolis, they say, well, fine by me, doesn't matter, I believe it when I see it. And other people, for a similar kind of reason, also are not really on board. You cannot automatically rely on their cooperation. They feel that they should preserve their identity. They don't want to be taken over by all kinds of new developments. They like newcomers, but they don't want to make room for them. They feel it's their right to hang on to the kind of region and cities and towns that they have been developing quietly over the years. And they may not be opposed to Eutropolis. They may say that they are in favor of the EU region, but in the same time, don't count on it, because it's very unlikely that they will make an active contribution. And to some extent, that is what you need in order to be successful. That is the challenge we are facing at the moment. And what we see is that the days that people from the top could single-mindedly decide what was going to happen, how things were to develop, these days are over. You need to have the people on your side. And coming back to my original question, why do things that we all say to like and that we all want to happen, why are they not happening? Very often it is because we have not listened well enough to the people whose support we need. One scenario could describe my promised land, my preferred future, but you have to accept that there always are other scenarios describing the desirable futures for other people. And only when you point out what the differences are, and where the differences are and have to be resolved, can you make progress. And if there is a feeling, as many people have, that there is some kind of paralysis, we are not feeling very satisfied, we feel our head is against the ceiling, and we don't see breakthroughs. On a project level, yes, but not for our society or for our region as a whole. It requires some kind of process where we point out why this is so. Because the worst you can do is to pretend that we all agree, when in reality we don't. Thank you very much.